The rain hammered against the window pane, each drop a tiny fist beating a rhythm of despair against the glass of their small apartment. Inside, the silence was louder, a suffocating blanket woven from words that could never be unsaid. Mark stood by the door, his new tailored suit feeling like a costume, the fabric stiff and foreign against his skin. He had just come from a dinner with his boss, Mr. Sterling, a man who built empires and broke men with the same casual smile. "I don't understand," Amelia whispered, her voice fragile. She sat on the edge of their worn sofa, her hands resting protectively over the gentle swell of her belly. She was 6 months pregnant, and the soft glow she'd carried for weeks had been extinguished, replaced by the stark pallor of shock. "A promotion. This is supposed to be a good thing, Mark. For us." "It is a good thing," he said, his voice hard, unfamiliar even to himself. He couldn't look at her, couldn't look at the life they had built in that cramped space. The mismatched mugs, the faded photograph from their honeymoon, the half-painted wall of what was meant to be the nursery. "It's a good thing for me. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Vice President of Development. Sterling is putting me on the fast track." "Then why do you look like you're at a funeral?" she asked, her eyes pleading with him to make it make sense. He finally turned, and the man she saw was a stranger. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp ambition that cut her to the core. "Because this," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room, at her stomach, "this is an anchor, Amelia. A beautiful, wonderful anchor, but an anchor all the same. Sterling as much as said it. A man with baggage can only go so far. A man who is free, who can dedicate every waking hour to the company, who can entertain clients, travel at a moment's notice. A man who can date his boss's daughter." The words left her lips before she could stop them. She'd seen the way Isabella Sterling looked at Mark at the last company picnic. It wasn't subtle. Mark's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. The silence was his confession. "This isn't about Isabella. This is about my future. Our future was this tiny apartment and counting pennies until the next paycheck. My future can be so much more." Tears began to trace silent paths down her cheeks. "Our future was our child, Mark. Our family. And what kind of life can I give a child from here?" He shot back, his voice rising with a desperate, self-serving logic. "Struggling, watching his father be passed over for promotion after promotion because he's tied down? I'm doing this for him too, so one day I can give him everything." "He doesn't need everything," she sobbed, her body trembling. "He needs a father. I need my husband." "What I need," Mark said, the finality in his tone like a slamming door, "is for you to leave. I'll send you money. I'll take care of everything from a distance. But I can't have you here. I need a clean break. It's the only way." The cruelty of it stole her breath. He wasn't just ending their marriage, he was erasing it. He was treating her and their unborn child as a temporary inconvenience to be managed and filed away. The trembling stopped. A strange, chilling calm washed over her. She slowly stood up, her movements deliberate, her spine straight. She looked at him, her eyes clear now, the tears having washed away the last of her illusions. "You're a coward, Mark," she said, her voice even and low. "You're not doing this for some grand future. You're doing it because you're weak. You let a rich man dangle a trinket in front of you, and you're willing to sell your soul for it. You'll get your promotion. You'll get the corner office and the expensive dinners. But you will be hollow." She walked into their bedroom without another word. He heard the quiet clicks of a suitcase latch. He didn't move, didn't offer to help, didn't try to take it back. He was a statue of his own ambition. When she emerged, she carried a single small bag. She didn't look at him as she walked to the door. Her hand rested on the knob, and for a moment he thought she might say something else, might plead one last time. Instead, she paused and spoke to the door. "One day you are going to look back on this moment, on what you threw away tonight. And the regret will be so profound, it will eat you alive." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut, and the only sound was the rain, still hammering, still beating, against the window of the empty life he had chosen. The next 8 months were a blur of success and calculated forgetting. Mark got everything he thought he wanted. The vice president title was his. The corner office with its panoramic view of the city skyline became his domain. He traded his reliable sedan for a gleaming black German sports car that purred with power. He was dating Isabella Sterling, a whirlwind of champagne flutes, charity galas, and weekend trips to her family's estate in the country. He was the golden boy of Innovatech Solutions. His projects were funded without question, his ideas lauded in board meetings. Mr. Sterling treated him like a son, clapping him on the back and introducing him to influential people with a proud glint in his eye. Mark told himself he was happy. He repeated it like a mantra every morning as he knotted his silk tie, the reflection in the mirror showing a man who was sharper, leaner, but with a new hardness around his eyes. He tried to do what he considered the right thing by Amelia. He hired a private investigator to find her, to set up a trust fund for the child, but it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. The investigator found nothing. Her parents' old number was disconnected, their house sold. Her friends, the few they'd shared, claimed not to have heard from her. It was a clean break, just as he'd wanted, yet it was unsettling. It was too clean. It gnawed at him in the quiet hours of the night when the thrill of a closed deal or the scent of Isabella's expensive perfume faded, leaving a void that felt vast and cold. Sometimes a wave of guilt so sharp it made him gasp would wash over him. He'd see a pregnant woman on the street and his heart would seize. He'd hear a baby cry in a restaurant and have to excuse himself. He'd push the feelings down, drowning them in expensive whiskey and the constant demanding hum of his work. He was building an empire, he told himself. Sacrifices were necessary. His only real link to his past life was David Chen, a senior analyst who had been friends with both him and Amelia. David had never been the same with him since Amelia left. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a polite professional distance that was colder than any argument. "Haven't seen you since the quarterly review," David said one afternoon, catching Mark by the coffee machine. "You're flying high, man." "Just working hard," Mark replied, forcing a smile. David stirred his coffee, not meeting Mark's eyes. "I heard you were looking for Amelia." Mark's guard went up. "Just wanted to make sure she was okay, that the baby was okay." "Funny way of showing it," David said, his voice flat. He finally looked up, and his gaze was accusatory. "We all saw how you were with Isabella at the Christmas party, Mark. Weeks after you kicked your pregnant wife out. We saw." The casual condemnation hit Mark like a physical blow. "You don't know the whole story." "I know Amelia," David said simply, "and I know she deserved better. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mark. I really do. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already lost it." David walked away, leaving Mark standing alone, the coffee turning bitter in his mouth. The encounter unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He was living the dream, yet David's words echoed the hollow feeling in his own chest. He shook it off. David was sentimental. He didn't understand the pressures, the opportunities, the sheer scale of the world Mark now inhabited. He was on a rocket ship, and you couldn't bring baggage along for the ride. Isabella, for her part, was the perfect partner for his new life. She was beautiful, well-connected, and utterly uninterested in the messy, emotional details of his past. To her, Amelia was a footnote, a starter wife from a life he had wisely shared. "Daddy says the board is considering you for the new international expansion project," she said one evening, swirling a glass of wine in their high-rise apartment. A place so sleek and minimalist it felt like living in a magazine. It would mean a huge promotion, maybe even a seat on the board in a few years. "That's the goal," Mark said, looking out at the city lights that glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds. "You just have to keep impressing him," she purred, draping her arms around his neck. "No distractions, no mistakes." He turned and kissed her, the gesture practiced, the passion a well-rehearsed performance. He was playing a role, and he was playing it perfectly. He had the script, the costume, the stage. He just had to ignore the growing, terrifying feeling that he had forgotten his real lines and the real person he was supposed to be. He was so focused on the horizon, on the next peak to conquer, that he never once thought to look back and see the storm that was gathering silently, powerfully, behind him. The first tremor was subtle. A major client, a tech giant that accounted for nearly a quarter of Innovatech's revenue, unexpectedly pulled their contract. The official reason was a strategic realignment, but the whispers in the hallways told a different story. They'd been poached by a competitor, a mysterious and aggressive new player in the market called Ethelred Holdings. Mr. Sterling, usually unflappable, became tense. The jovial, backslapping boss was replaced by a man who snapped at his assistants and held hushed, frantic phone calls behind his closed office door. Projects were suddenly scrutinized, budgets tightened. The atmosphere of effortless success that had defined Mark's tenure as VP began to evaporate, replaced by a creeping anxiety. "It's just a market fluctuation," Sterling assured Mark over a tense lunch, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "Ethelred is a flash in the pan. Corporate raiders. They'll burn out." But they didn't burn out. Over the next few months, Ethelred Holdings moved with surgical precision. They acquired 2 of Innovatech's key suppliers, disrupting their supply chain. They headhunted 3 of their top engineers, offering salaries and benefits that Sterling couldn't hope to match. It was less like competition and more like a siege. Mark found himself working harder than ever, trying to plug the leaks in a ship that was taking on water faster than he could bail. The international expansion project was put on indefinite hold. His star, once ascending so brightly, seemed to be dimming. Isabella grew petulant, her world of casual luxury threatened by her father's souring mood. "This is all your fault," she snapped at him one night after a particularly brutal quarterly report. "Daddy put you in charge of the development team, and now our biggest client is gone. You were supposed to be the wunderkind." "This isn't my fault, Izzy," Mark retorted, exhausted. "This Ethelred group is playing a different game. No one saw them coming." The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday morning. It came not as a whisper, but as a corporate earthquake. An email sent to every single employee landed in their inboxes at precisely 9 a.m. Subject: Urgent all hands. Meeting and leadership transition. To all Innovatech Solutions employees, please be advised that an emergency all-hands meeting will be held today at 11:10 a.m. in the main auditorium. Attendance is mandatory. Effective immediately, Innovatech Solutions has been acquired by Ethelred Holdings. As part of this transition, the current board of directors has been dissolved. Mr. Gerald Sterling will be stepping down from his role as CEO. The new Chief Executive Officer of Innovatech Solutions, representing Ethelred Holdings, will be introduced at the meeting and will outline the new strategic vision for the company. The office erupted. People poured out of their cubicles, phones in hand, voices a rising tide of panic and disbelief. Acquired. Sterling was out. It was a hostile takeover, executed with breathtaking speed and silence. Mark felt the floor drop out from under him. His entire career, his entire identity at the company was built on his relationship with Sterling. He was Sterling's man. With Sterling gone, he was not just exposed. He was a relic of a fallen regime. He saw David Chen across the bullpen. David was reading the email, his expression not one of shock, but of intense, focused curiosity. Their eyes met for a second, and David gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a look that Mark couldn't decipher. He found Isabella in her father's outer office, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. "What is happening?" she cried, grabbing his arm. "Who is Ethelred Holdings? Who is this new CEO?" "I don't know," Mark said, his own mind racing. He felt a cold dread coiling in his stomach. He had hitched his wagon to a falling star, and now he was about to crash back down to earth. At 10:55 a.m., the entire company filed into the auditorium. The air was thick with tension, a funereal silence hanging over the crowd. On the stage, a podium was set up. To the side, Gerald Sterling sat in a single chair, looking like a man who had aged a decade overnight. He was diminished, a king deposed, waiting to watch the coronation of his usurper. Mark stood near the back with Isabella, her hand gripping his so tightly his fingers were numb. He scanned the faces in the crowd, seeing his own fear reflected in 100 others. He had climbed so high, so fast, he'd sacrificed everything to get here, and now it seemed he was about to lose it all at the hands of a complete stranger. The clock on the wall ticked to 11 sals. The side doors of the auditorium swung open with a soft whoosh, and all heads turned. The siege was over. The conqueror had arrived. The footsteps echoed in the cavernous silence of the auditorium. They were not heavy or rushed, but measured, confident, the sound of someone who knew they owned the very ground they walked on. A small group of people in severe, dark suits entered first, their faces impassive as they flanked the entrance like a Praetorian guard. And then she walked in. From the back of the room, Mark could only see a silhouette against the bright light of the hallway. It was a woman, that much was clear. She was tall, poised, her movements fluid and utterly self-assured. She wore a deep sapphire blue dress, a color so rich and commanding it seemed to draw all the light in the room toward it. The crowd, which had been murmuring in anxious whispers, fell completely silent. The shift in atmosphere was instantaneous and absolute. Power had entered the room. She walked down the central aisle, her heels clicking a steady, resolute rhythm on the polished floor. Mark felt a strange, inexplicable jolt, a flicker of recognition so faint he dismissed it as a trick of the light. As she drew closer, details came into focus. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant, intricate style. Around her neck was a single piece of jewelry, a stunning diamond and sapphire necklace that glittered under the stage lights, resembling a delicate, modern crown. Isabella gasped beside him. "My God, who is that?" she whispered, a note of awe in her voice. Mark didn't answer. He was frozen, his entire being focused on the woman approaching the stage. She wasn't looking at the crowd. Her gaze was fixed forward, on the podium, on the future she was there to claim. She moved past their row, and for a fleeting second he caught the scent of her perfume, a subtle, clean fragrance of white tea and citrus. It was familiar. Agonizingly familiar. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. It can't be. It's not possible. It's just someone who looks like her. She reached the stage and ascended the short flight of stairs with an easy grace. She didn't look at the broken man sitting in the chair, her predecessor, Gerald Sterling. She walked directly to the podium, placed her notes down, and turned to face the company. Her company. The stage lights hit her full in the face, and the collective gasp that rippled through the auditorium was drowned out by the roar in Mark's own ears. It was Amelia. But it was not the Amelia he had cast out into the rain. That woman had been soft, her eyes full of love, and then devastating hurt. This woman was forged from steel. Her face was the same, yet entirely different. The gentle curves of her cheeks were now defined by a sharp intelligence, her mouth set in a line of calm authority. Her eyes, the same warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with such adoration, were now cool, analytical, and held an unnerving depth of power. She looked out at the sea of faces, her gaze sweeping over them all, over him, without a single flicker of recognition. It was worse than hatred. It was indifference. Mark's world tilted on its axis. The air left his lungs in a rush, and the room began to spin. Every cruel word he had ever said to her crashed down on him at once. "This is an anchor, Amelia. I need a clean break. You're holding me back." He felt Isabella's hand recoil from his, as if he were suddenly white-hot. He dared a glance at her. Her face was a mask of utter disbelief and dawning horror. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She was looking from Amelia on the stage to Mark, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The discarded wife, the forgotten baggage, was now their new queen. Across the room, Mark's eyes found David Chen's. David was staring at Amelia, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. But as his gaze shifted and met Mark's, the shock was replaced by something else. A slow, dawning, terrible understanding. He finally understood the look David had given him earlier. It wasn't confusion. It was pity. Amelia tapped the microphone, a light sound that boomed through the silent hall. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was the same, but the tremor of vulnerability was gone, replaced by a clear, resonant tone that commanded attention. "My name is Amelia Ethelred, and as of this morning, I am the chief executive officer of this company." Mark felt his knees weaken. Ethelred. It wasn't just the name of the company, it was her name. He had never even known her mother's maiden name. He had never bothered to ask. He stood there, a ghost at a feast, watching the woman he had thrown away for a promotion take her throne, and on her throne she wore a crown of diamonds and his own spectacular ruin. He couldn't move, he couldn't breathe, he could only stare as the past he had tried so desperately to bury rose up to swallow him whole. Amelia's speech was a masterpiece of corporate warfare, delivered with the calm precision of a surgeon. She did not raise her voice. She did not use inflammatory language. She simply laid out the facts, and the facts were a brutal indictment of the old regime. For the past 2 years, she began, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces, Innovatech Solutions has been a ship adrift. It has prioritized short-term gains over long-term stability. It has rewarded sycophancy over innovation. It has leveraged personal relationships for promotions, creating a culture of mediocrity that has led to the loss of key clients and a stagnation of market share. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and Mark could feel each one hitting its target. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes glancing surreptitiously at him and the now trembling Gerald Sterling. She was systematically dismantling Sterling's legacy, and by extension, Mark's entire career, in front of everyone. That era ends today, Amelia declared. Ethelred Holdings did not acquire this company to strip it for parts. We acquired it because we see a glimmer of the brilliance it once had. Our mission is to reignite that brilliance. To do that, we must first clear away the rot. She gestured coolly towards Sterling. Mr. Sterling's tenure is over. We thank him for his service. The dismissal was so curt, so utterly devoid of warmth, it was more insulting than any tirade. Security guards, who had been standing discreetly by the doors, moved forward and stood behind Sterling's chair. He looked up at them, his face ashen, and seemed to shrink into himself. Furthermore, Amelia continued, her voice unwavering, a full independent audit of every department will begin this afternoon. We will be assessing all projects, all personnel, and all promotions made within the last 24 months. Performance, not politics, will be the sole metric of value moving forward. Some of you will find this transition challenging. For others, it will be the opportunity you have been waiting for. The choice is yours. She never looked at Mark, not once. He was just another face in the crowd, another variable in her equation. That utter lack of acknowledgement was the cruelest cut of all. It told him he was no longer a person to her. He was a line item, a problem to be assessed and dealt with. The meeting concluded. As the lights came up, a wave of frenzied chatter filled the room. People scrambled, pulling out phones, huddling in panicked groups. Mark remained frozen in place. Isabella had already let go of his hand and taken 2 steps away from him, creating a physical distance as if he were contagious. You knew, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. That was her. That was the wife you got rid of? I didn't know, Mark stammered, his mind still reeling. I had no idea who her family was, what she— Oh, save it, Isabella spat, her face contorted with fury and fear. You didn't just divorce some nobody, Mark. You divorced an Ethelred, and you brought her right to our doorstep. My father is ruined, and it's because of you. You brought this down on us. She turned and fled, pushing her way through the crowd, leaving him utterly alone. He had to talk to her. He had to explain. He stumbled forward, trying to get to the stage, but her security team had already formed a tight cordon around her. She was listening to a man in a grey suit, nodding, her expression focused and professional. Amelia, he called out, his voice sounding desperate and thin. She didn't turn. One of the security guards, a large man with an impassive face, stepped into his path. Mom is not taking questions at this time, sir. But I'm her husband. The words were out before he could stop them, pathetic and absurd. The guard's expression didn't change. I believe you'll find that is no longer the case. Please step back. Defeated, Mark retreated. He watched as she was escorted out through a side door, the center of a new universe, leaving him in the chaotic wake of her arrival. He felt a hand on his shoulder and flinched. It was David. Mark, David said, his voice low, you need to get your things and go. What? I can't just leave. I'm the VP of development. For how long? David asked, his eyes filled with a sad, weary honesty. Did you listen to what she said? Audit of all promotions in the last 24 months. That's you, man. You are Exhibit A of everything she came here to destroy. How did this happen? Mark asked, his voice cracking. Who is she? David sighed, running a hand over his face. I did some digging after she disappeared. I was worried. I couldn't find anything until I remembered a story she told me once about her grandmother. Her mother's maiden name was Ethelred. as in Julian Ethelred, the founder of Ethelred Holdings, the reclusive mega-billionaire who dropped off the map 20 years ago. Amelia is his granddaughter, his sole heir. The scale of his mistake, of his catastrophic ignorance, crashed down on Mark. He had thought she was like him, from a simple middle-class background. She had never talked about her family's money, had never acted like it. She had lived with him in their tiny apartment, happily clipping coupons and dreaming of a simple life. He had mistaken humility for poverty. He had mistaken grace for weakness. She was hiding in plain sight, Mark whispered, horrified. No, David corrected him gently. She wasn't hiding. She was just being herself. You were the one who was so blinded by what you wanted that you never bothered to see who you had. David squeezed his shoulder once more. Go home, Mark. It's over. He walked back to his corner office, the panoramic view now seeming to mock him. It was a kingdom he had stolen, and the rightful queen had just returned to claim it. His hands trembled as he packed his personal effects into a cardboard box. A framed photo of him and Isabella at a gala, a stupid trophy for a golf tournament, a pen set from sterling. They were the meaningless trinkets of a life that had just been rendered obsolete. As he walked out of his office, box in hand, he saw two people from the audit team already standing at the door. Their faces grim, their laptops open. They didn't even acknowledge him as he passed. He was already a ghost. The summons came 3 days later. It was not a phone call or a personal visit, but a cold, impersonal email from the office of the CEO. Mr. Markinson, your presence is required for a meeting with Ms. Ethelred on Friday at 4:01 p.m. Her office. Do not be late. For 3 days, Mark had existed in a state of suspended animation. He didn't leave his apartment, the sleek, empty space that was now a monument to his folly. Isabella wasn't answering his calls. His work email had been deactivated within an hour of him leaving the building. He was cut off, isolated, left alone with the cacophony of his own regrets. He played the final conversation with Amelia over and over in his head, her quiet dignity, her chillingly accurate prophecy. The regret will be so profound, it will eat you alive. It was already starting to gnaw at his insides. He spent an hour getting ready for the meeting, choosing his best suit, knotting his tie with shaking hands. He didn't know what he was hoping for. Forgiveness? A second chance? A chance to explain. He knew deep down that he deserved none of it. The walk into the Innovatech building was a walk of shame. The receptionist, who used to greet him with a bright smile, now looked through him, her eyes flicking away nervously. The employees he passed in the hall either avoided his gaze completely or watched him with a mixture of pity and contempt. He was yesterday's news, the poster boy for the fallen regime. The executive floor was transformed. The dark wood and stuffy old-world decor of Sterling's era had been ripped out, replaced with clean lines, glass, and minimalist art. It was efficient, modern, and intimidating. Sterling's former secretary was gone, replaced by a sharp, impeccably dressed man who checked Mark's name on a tablet. "Ms. Ethelred will see you now," he said, his tone suggesting Mark was a particularly unpleasant mess to be cleaned up. He opened the door to what was once his corner office, his goal, his prize. It was now Amelia's throne room. The heavy mahogany desk was gone, replaced by a sleek white standing desk. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in complex diagrams and strategic plans. The panoramic view was the same, but the person commanding it was not. Amelia was standing with her back to him, looking out at the city. She didn't turn when he entered. "Close the door," she said, her voice calm and even. He did as he was told, the click of the latch sounding like a cell door locking. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. He could hear the frantic beat of his own heart. "Amelia, he began, his voice raspy. "You will address me as Ms. Ethelred," she said, still not turning. "In this office, that is my name." The rebuke was swift and absolute. It established the new reality instantly. There was no Amelia here for him, only the CEO. "Ms. Ethelred," he corrected himself, tasting ash. "I don't know what to say. I had no idea." "That is precisely the problem, isn't it, Mark?" She finally turned, her face an unreadable mask of cool professionalism. "You had no idea. You never bothered to know. You saw a convenient, supportive, unassuming woman who would decorate your arm and your home while you chased your ambitions. You never once thought to ask about her family, her history, her own mind. It never occurred to you that she might have ambitions of her own. She walked over to her desk, her movements graceful and deliberate. She picked up a thick file. This is the audit of the development department. Your department. It's a disaster. Inflated budgets, projects greenlit based on their appeal to Mr. Sterling's ego rather than market viability, and a promotion to vice president for a man whose only discernible qualification was a willingness to abandon his pregnant wife to date the boss's daughter. She dropped the file on the desk. The thud echoed in the silent room. Mark flinched, as if he'd been struck. "This isn't personal, Mark," she said, her voice dropping to an almost conversational, yet chillingly detached tone. "Though I imagine it feels that way to you. This is business. You are a liability, a poor investment made by the previous administration. My job is to correct those errors." He felt a desperate need to make her see him, the man she once loved, not just the employee she was about to discard. "Amelia, please. What I did, it was unforgivable. I was a fool. I was blinded by ambition, by everything Sterling promised me. I think about that night every single day." For the first time, a flicker of something personal crossed her features. It wasn't anger or pain, it was a cold, distant curiosity. "Do you? Do you really?" she asked. "Or do you only think about it now because the consequences have finally caught up to you?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked back towards the window, her gaze once again on the city below. "You called my child an anchor, Mark. You threw us away for a corner office. You thought we were weighing you down, holding you back from all of this." She made a sweeping gesture at the skyline. "Well, now I own the building, and several others besides." She paused, then turned back to her desk and picked up a simple silver frame that had been facing her. She held it for a moment before turning it around for him to see. His breath caught in his throat. It was a photograph of a beautiful baby boy, maybe 6 or 7 months old, with a tuft of dark hair and Amelia's warm brown eyes. He was smiling, a gummy, joyous smile that lit up his entire face. "This is Leo," Amelia said, her voice softening for the first time, a profound maternal love flowing into her words. "Leo Ethelred. The anchor you discarded. He is the heir to all of this. He is my strength. He is my motivation for every single thing I do." She placed the photo back on the desk, facing her. Then she looked at Mark, her eyes now hard as diamonds. "You, on the other hand," she said, her voice returning to its icy executive tone, "are an accounting error, and I am about to correct it. Your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. Your severance will be the legal minimum, as stipulated in your contract. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the premises." It was the end, delivered not with a scream of rage, but with the quiet, indifferent finality of a business transaction. He had treated her and their child as an inconvenience to be managed, and she had now managed him right out of her life. He wanted to scream, to beg, to fall on his knees. But he couldn't move. He could only stare at the silver frame on her desk. At the face of the sun, he would never know. He had chased a kingdom of glass and steel, and in his greed, he had thrown away the only thing that was ever truly real. The door opened, and 2 uniformed guards stepped inside. They didn't touch him, but their presence was an impassable wall. The meeting was over. His life, as he knew it, was over. The fall was as swift as his rise had been arrogant. Mark's name became a whisper, then a void. He lost the apartment, the car, the friends who were never really his. He descended into a life of cheap motel rooms and the acrid smell of failure. His days were a grey blur of searching for jobs he was overqualified for but blacklisted from. His nights were long, silent affairs spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by the ghost of a life he had murdered. 2 months after his firing, the city's elite gathered for the Innovatech relaunch gala, a glittering event to celebrate the company's new direction under Amelia Ethelred. Mark read about it on a discarded newspaper he found in a coffee shop. He saw a photo of her, poised and powerful in an emerald gown, and a desperate, foolish plan began to form in the wreckage of his mind. He had to see her. He had to make her understand. He used the last of his money to rent a shabby tuxedo that smelled of mothballs. He stood across the street from the Grand Hotel, a pathetic spectre watching the city's powerful and beautiful sweep past him into the warm golden light. He waited for a moment of distraction, then slipped past the harried security guards, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of shame and adrenaline. Inside, the opulence was a physical assault. The clink of champagne glasses, the murmur of important conversations, the scent of expensive perfume. It was the world he had craved, now a fortress from which he was exiled. He saw her holding court near the grand staircase, surrounded by admirers. She was laughing, and the sound was like a shard of glass in his gut. He moved through the crowd, his ill-fitting suit and gaunt face drawing curious, disdainful stares. He reached the edge of her circle just as she was finishing a conversation. "Amelia," he said, his voice a hoarse croak. She turned. The smile on her face didn't vanish. It froze, becoming a mask of polished ice. The warmth in her eyes was extinguished, replaced by a look of profound annoyance. "Mark, you are not welcome here." "Please," he begged, his voice low and urgent, ignoring the shocked faces around them. "Just 5 minutes. I need to talk to you. I need to apologize. For everything. For Leo." "You don't get to say his name," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You forfeited that right. You are embarrassing yourself. Leave now." "I can't," he cried, his control snapping. "Don't you see what you've done to me? I have nothing. I lost everything." "Correction," a calm voice said from beside Amelia. David Chen stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her arm. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his face calm, but his eyes hard. "You didn't lose anything. You gave it all away. She just built something better on the land you abandoned." Mark stared at his former friend, bewildered. "David, what are you doing? You work for her." "I always worked for her," David said, and the floor fell away from under Mark for the second time. "From the day you threw her out, I worked for her." Amelia watched, her face impassive, allowing her ally to deliver the final killing blow. "You were so arrogant, Mark," David continued, his voice cutting through the hushed silence that had fallen around them. "You never noticed me." The quiet analyst. "You thought I was just a sentimental fool. But I was watching. I saw every inflated budget you approved to impress Sterling. I saw every good idea you stole from a junior developer. I saw every corner you cut, and I documented it all." Mark's face went white. You fed her information. You helped her do this." "Helped her?" David let out a short, bitter laugh. "Mark, she didn't need my help to be brilliant. She is a strategic genius. I just gave her the key to the castle you were so busy polishing. I told her which clients were unhappy, which suppliers were being squeezed, which executives were loyal only to Sterling's checkbook. I gave her the roadmap to your downfall." "Why?" Mark whispered, the single word a testament to his utter incomprehension of a world not centered on himself. "Because she was my friend," David said, his voice ringing with a conviction Mark had never known. "Because you broke her heart and threatened her future, and you did it for a promotion and a sports car. You made your choice. And I made mine. It's called loyalty. You should look it up sometime." Amelia finally spoke, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Security." 2 large men appeared at his elbows. Mark didn't struggle. He was paralyzed, his mind reeling from the final devastating revelation. It wasn't just karma. It was a plan. A meticulous, patient, and perfectly executed revenge. He had been the architect of his own destruction, and David had simply handed Amelia the blueprints. As they dragged him through the gawking crowd, past the Sterlings who stared at him with pure hatred, he looked back one last time. Amelia had already turned away, laughing at something an admirer said, dismissing him from her life as easily as one would flick away a piece of lint. Weeks later, he was working a dead-end job as a courier. The work was grueling, anonymous. His route took him downtown, past the gleaming glass tower of his former kingdom. He parked his battered van across the street, a creature of habit drawn to the source of his pain. At 5 o'clock he saw her. Amelia emerged and her CEO persona melted away as a nanny brought her a small boy in a winter coat. Leo. She swung him into her arms, burying her face in his neck, her laughter a genuine, happy sound that the wind carried across the street to him like a phantom whisper. As she was about to get into her car, she looked up, her gaze sweeping across the street. For a single, heart-stopping second, her eyes met Mark's. He was just a man in a shabby uniform, a ghost on the edge of her brilliant life. There was no anger in her eyes, no hatred, no triumph. There was just a flicker of something far worse, a cool, distant pity. A brief acknowledgement of an error she had once made and had long since corrected. Then she broke eye contact, turned, and slipped into the warm, safe world of the car. The door closed, shutting him out forever. The town car pulled smoothly into traffic, carrying away the woman he had betrayed, the son he had abandoned, and the life he had so foolishly thrown away. Mark stood alone on the cold pavement, the weight of his regret the only thing he had left. Watching the taillights fade until they were just another pair of anonymous red dots in a city that no longer knew his name.